Continuing on from the demonstration of the new input types, this is the underlying code for the page I was just demonstrating to you. So beginning at the top, you'll notice that I have two forms. The first form is marked with a no validate attribute. Now there may be certain types of forms, like for instance a search form, where you want to make sure that you're not triggering any sort of validation rules. So you can mark your form in the element declaration to say no validate. Next, when I take a look at my search input type, you can see that I'm setting it up as type equals search and then applying the autofocus attribute. And again, this is all you need to do in order to make a single element the focus of a page when it loads. And just a reminder, you need to make sure that you only have one and only one item have the autofocus attribute. The next form contains the rest of the input elements. So here's my input type equals text, but I have the placeholder attribute showing first and last. This is that helper text that shows up within the text box so people have an idea of what they need to enter into that box. I'm also setting it as required so that as I try to validate against this form, it'll know that this element must have a value. I'm doing the same thing here for my input type equals email, making that required. And then for URL and phone, I'm just setting the specific input types. For the number of years in development, I have an input type equals number, but I'm also able to add some constraints into it as well. So you'll notice here I have a minimum value of 5 and a maximum value of 40. Now that step value comes into play because as I'm using the spin buttons, it'll increment or decrement the value by the amount found in the step attribute. So this will be a place for the validation to take a look at the values to make sure it fits within the acceptable range of a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 40. Next, I have my range input element. And here I'm saying the minimum value is 0, maximum value is 100, and the step value is 1. The initial value is set as 50. And here's that span element I was showing you that's updated every time the value changes on the range element. Next is the text box for t-shirt color. Now this is just your standard text box, but again notice that it has the value for list set to colors. That matches the ID set to data list. When the users begin to interact with that text box, the values that show in each one of the options of the data list will appear underneath the editable text box. Now for the input type equals color, you can see that I'm giving an RGB value to act as the initial value for that element. For the input type equals date, the value is just your standard date value of year, month, and day. You can also add minimum and maximum ranges to the date elements as well. For date time, I'm adding in the date as well as the time. And the same thing for date time local. For arrival time, all I need to do is pass in a properly formatted time value. And for month and week, there's a specialized format for its value. For month, you add in the year, a dash, and the number of month within the year. So 04 would be April, 01 would be January, and 12 would be December. The value for week is the year dash a capital W and the number between 1 and 52. There's 52 weeks in the year, so week 26 is about the middle of the year. So now that you're acquainted with the different input types, let's just take a quick peek at how they perform in different web browsers.